ASU is facing Wisconsin in the Las Vegas Bowl tonight. So we're giving you a game preview of the matchup, as we're also talking about Pac-12 basketball and everything going on with COVID-19 and cancellations. All of that on today's episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in every day. Joining me today is Conner Dreos from Locked On Sun Devils. I'm your host, Cindy Robinson, former Pac-12 student athlete. And really quick, today's episode is brought to you by NetSuite. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for a special end of the year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. All right. Well, today we are talking ASU Sun Devils football. It's almost into their season officially. They will be capping it off with the Las Vegas Bowl tonight against Wisconsin. And of course, no better person to have on here other than his co-host. But
No.
Conner Dreos.
You said no better. That is cemented on this podcast. It's been said. You cannot take it back. I will be tweeting about that. It is going out on social media for sure.
You cannot get me like that. Then Richie's gonna have my hand. We can't. I love both of you. It's equal here.
When you put the video out on social media, I'm gonna tweet it at him and just say look at 1 minute, 5 seconds into the podcast. Just watch that segment.
Oh, okay. I got to come up with a good excuse to talk to Richie later, but we'll figure it out. None other. We love having Conner and Richie on to talk ASU Sun Devils. They're very knowledgeable. They're our local experts. So, Conner, first and foremost, I want to applaud you for being one of the few teams that are able to actually make it and compete in a bowl game, considering how many cancellations we've seen. Earlier this week, we saw the Holiday Bowl get canceled. UCLA had to back out literally last minute, hours before kickoff. Washington State scrambled to find a replacement, and they'll be playing Central Michigan tomorrow in the Sun Bowl. It's still happening, but we get another bowl game today. ASU versus Wisconsin, a chance for ASU to redeem themselves from their season and finish off strong. So going into this matchup, how are you feeling?
It depends. Am I, as far as like an ASU fan, not feeling very good. I would say with all of our starters in, whether it is COVID or people opting out for the bowl game, the NFL draft, whatever that might be. I would say Wisconsin. Let me back up. It's kind of ironic these teams are playing each other. They're both 8-4. Both had a lot of preseason hype, I would say, and both kind of fell short, missing some few key games, whether it was early on or down the stretch. So these teams kind of match up very well in terms of neither team passes the ball very effectively, and they run the ball a ton. Defenses have been very solid this year. I think on yesterday's podcast for Locked On Sun Devils, I was looking at a ton of numbers. The team's defense combined for 37 combined points allowed. So if we end up seeing a defensive slugfest and a ton of just runs between Braylon Allen or Daniel Nagata or Jaden Daniels, whatever that might be, would not be surprised at all. Feeling good is not the term I would use as of right now, but sports are weird. We say that all the time, right? So I'm not going to count the Sun Devils out as of yet. This is actually going to be the first matchup for ASU and Wisconsin since 2013. I don't know if you remember that game. Sun Devil fans definitely remember that well, because it was either they spiked the ball as time was expiring or they spiked it on 4th down or something as they were getting ready to kick a game-winning field goal. And ultimately, it was a turnover on downs, and ASU just stormed the field immediately after. So they only ended up winning by 2 points. So they probably would have lost that game if it was done properly. But a win's a win, right?
Yes, Richie and I were talking about that last week and how big this game will be because that storyline kind of has resurfaced. So it's kind of like Wisconsin has a target on your back just for that alone. They have to redeem themselves when it comes to that. But you mentioned how both these teams rely on the run game, and one major key component to the Sun Devils is kind of missing, right? The duo that we've seen. Two major. Chip Trayanum and Rachaad White will be not playing in this game. They opted out. Chip is transferring.
Chip's transferring.
And Rachaad is opting out for the draft. Do you have faith in Daniel Ngata?
I think we should, right? He hasn't done anything to not he hasn't done anything to necessarily lose that trust. When he has played, he's played well as Rachaad White. No, maybe as good of a runner as Chip Trayanum, probably not. But that being said, he also hasn't gotten a ton of opportunity either. Yeah. I think it was the game against BYU. He came in later in that game and gave them a pretty big spark. They actually kind of went away from Daniel Ngata in that game because I think Rachaad White was out. Chip Trayanum may have even gotten banged up, if I'm not mistaken. And it kind of went away from him, even though it was working really well. So he hasn't gotten the opportunity to earn the trust, but he also hasn't done anything to lose it. That being said, ASU has kind of relied on a two-headed monster between the two other running backs in front of him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they implement their new playbook, assuming they've added a couple plays specifically for Daniel Ngata and how they're going to be able to utilize him. Jaden Daniels has been an effective runner all season. It's the best we've ever seen him run. So I would expect a lot to happen between those two. That being said, while they do match up very well and they've run the ball, because they don't have the bodies they've had, I wouldn't be too surprised to see Jaden Daniels out of necessity have to throw the ball a little bit more. I'm not saying he's going to do it well. I'm not saying he's going to be effective with it, but instead of like 23, 24 pass attempts, whatever he was averaging through the season, if it ends up being like low 30s just because they have to pass a little bit, wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah. All right, coming up next, we'll kind of switch focuses more onto ASU's defense and how they're lacking a little bit too on that side, and talk a little bit about Wisconsin's offense. This is it, the putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. With visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more, NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of your competition. 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. I feel like I cut out at the end of that, so I hope the ad went all the way through, but it's okay. I'm back. If it was going to cut out, I'd rather cut out during that time. It's all good. Coming back to our conversation about the Las Vegas Bowl, one of the major things about these bowl games is that sometimes you have players opt out for the NFL draft for the purpose of transferring. This season, we definitely are seeing a lot more of that across the board, especially in the Pac-12 conference. Multiple teams have dealt with it, and ASU is one of those teams for sure. One, we can say we can blame it on the fact that there's a lot of talent there, right, that want to take it to the next level and prep for that next level and feel like this bowl game isn't as important maybe as what their future goals are. And I was talking to Richie about this. It's one of those things where you can't really knock somebody for choosing their future over, this one game. But I am curious to see how you feel about like people backing out of bowl games, because it almost feels like they're leaving something unfinished, in my opinion.
That's totally fair. And I think there's two sides of this, right? There is the Sun Devil fan of me that wants to see guys like Jack Jones, Chase Lucas, Darian Butler, Rachaad White, just to name a few, who have been phenomenal players for this team over the last season or two, or guys like Chase Lucas who have been here for 5 years, right? Guys we would love to see play one more game. But at the end of the day, when you start to talk about somebody's wallet or their future career, so that's kind of the other side of it, you can't really do that, right? It's not you per se. Like, yes, it is your school, it is your team, but for a game that's not the playoffs or the national championship, which if that's the case, these guys are more than likely going to play that game. This bowl game doesn't mean nothing. It just means more to the program than it does the individual players. So if they were to go out and win the Vegas Bowl, that's something cool they can talk about the rest of their lives, but it's not going to be nearly as impactful as somebody risking themselves getting hurt leading up to potentially the NFL draft. Not all these players are. I think several of them should be expected to be drafted like a Rachaad White. Others maybe sneak into the later rounds or find a kind of a team as like a camp body, but we'll see. But you bring up a good point. Like, should we be judging players for opting out? I think that it is up to the individual person. I'm never going to judge somebody for doing that, though. It is what it is. I think if you are like seriously like upset over that, you're probably being a little selfish as a fan. Yeah. Like, you got to put yourself in their shoes, right? Let's take Rachaad White as an example. Dude's given you everything he's had over the last, let's call it season and a half, because they had a shortened 2020 season. Dude was phenomenal for this team. And while he is the heart and soul of the offense this year, he's got to do what's best for him, right? So while it is not fun leading up to the Vegas Bowl, I totally understand where they're coming from. In some cases, though, like, we're talking about players who have opted out, right? There's players that could be missing this game due to COVID, right? We've talked about, I think it's five bowl games around the nation have already been canceled due to COVID-19 issues. Could be more, as bowl game season is still in full swing. I think last year it was 18, if my memory serves me correct. So we're definitely well short of that. But that being said, it takes one quick outbreak, right? What was it, UCLA that you had mentioned earlier, like hours before kickoff, that had all those positive tests pop up. So even as the time we're recording this podcast, ASU is still playing their game against the Wisconsin Badgers, but they're technically not out of the neck of the woods yet. Right now, there's no positive cases known for the Sun Devils team. Doesn't mean anything can pop up last second. Totally can. For the Wisconsin Badgers, I know their basketball team, both men and women, have had games rescheduled due to COVID-19 issues. And I think there is some on the Badgers side, but it's not many so far. And it's not Mertz or like Braylon Allen or maybe some of their big name players. So as of right now, I don't have any definable names. I think maybe one of their coaches has COVID issues as well. But as of right now, if everything stays as it is, this game's going to be played, barring any other positive tests.
Okay, well, considering that may not be missing any players due to COVID, but missing them for opting out reasons, transfer reasons, whatever. When it comes to ASU's defense, we've seen them kind of save ASU a lot this season. They've been the shining light in a lot of games. And missing players like Jack Jones and Chase Lucas are very tough to go into this matchup, I would say. So do you feel like you are concerned about the defense going into this matchup, facing the Wisconsin offense, or do you feel like they're still strong enough, even with their backups, to carry out this game?
I don't know how you can't be concerned. One thing that is kind of positive for this is that Wisconsin doesn't pass the ball very much. They average like 23-ish pass attempts per game and average like 160 yards to the air, give or take. So that's not a lot, right? And even with our starting two corners out, Tommy Hill transferring, so he's not playing in this bowl game, I really can't imagine Wisconsin's going to move away from their strength just to be able to attack a weakness of ours, right? If we can't stop Chez Mellusi or Braylon Allen on the ground, I don't see the reason why they wouldn't just run the ball. Darian Butler definitely, I think, hurts this team more than anybody. Being able to fill in some of those gaps, try to help stop the run a little bit, is not going to be fun. Now, you still have DJ Davidson, you still have Tyler Johnson on the edge, so your defensive line is all intact as of right now. So I think that's definitely very important. But I think so. Our defense obviously has saved us multiple times throughout the year. With Darian Butler being out, I hurt a little bit more over Rachaad White because he was the offense, right? Like they have to fill in the gaps real quick on the offensive side of the ball. Even if they can stop the Wisconsin Badgers from scoring a decent amount in this game, they have to go down and put up points themselves, which I just don't know if I see them doing. So the defensive side is definitely going to hurt a little bit. But I think if we were to lose a lot of players like we have, I think the secondary is probably the place I would pick versus that front seven trying to stop the Wisconsin Badgers on the run.
All right. Well, before we move on, I need to go ahead and get your prediction for tonight's game.
I wrote a score prediction down for yesterday's game. I want to make sure I have that same prediction right. Okay. I unfortunately am taking Wisconsin to cover the spread, which is currently at 6.5. I took Wisconsin to win 27-16.
Oh no!
The 16 for ASU means that Jaden Daniels has to provide one scoring drive and then 3 other drives where they kick a field goal. While that doesn't feel impossible, multiple scoring drives, I just don't know. I'm not sure they can rebound from losing their top 2 running backs. But I hope I'm wrong, right? Daniel Nagata is going to be a mainstay in this offense coming up next year. So if he can have what will be potentially a breakout game to end the season, that would be a real bright spot heading into the year. But like I said, Wisconsin, I took to win by 11, which would also just hit the over as well.
Okay. Well, make sure you all tune in tonight to see Arizona State take on Wisconsin in the Las Vegas Bowl. It is on at 7:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Mountain time. If you're ASU listening, if you're from Arizona listening. But coming up next, we're going to discuss basketball season and what's going on there with all these cancellations and COVID-19 as a huge threat. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowls season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, Conner. So something that has been pretty much a big issue as of this last month and maybe even earlier into the previous month, November, has been COVID-19 cases rising. And because of that, we've seen a bunch of Pac-12 basketball games get canceled or postponed, we'll say, with no exact date to return. We're not quite sure exactly when they'll play those games, but ASU is now being affected because of the opponents. ASU hasn't had to actually back out of any games, but USC and UCLA have canceled or postponed their games against ASU, and the date that they'll reschedule them on just depends on the Pac-12 conference and when they approve things. So right now, seeing how UCLA has been heavily affected, they haven't played since December 11th, I believe. And then now recently USC, seeing these different teams have to back out of these games. Are you at all concerned thinking like we may have to suspend the season altogether?
I think it's got to be brought up at least as a talking point, right? At the end of the day, health and safety matter more than anything else. So if it is a matter of trying to fit all these games within that same time frame, but you keep having positive cases pop up, if you can't play the games, you can't play the games. It's just It's not worth it. And I'm not a big fan of trying to have a half-baked season where some of the stars, like off of a UCLA as an example, who's had a very good season so far, if they can't put the best product in the court, and it's happening to other schools as well, I'm not sure the reason why you would want to play. I understand there's a ton that goes into it. A lot of decisions have to be made, a lot of potential revenue lost. But if numbers keep spiking across sports, not even just college football, but sports in general, I'm not sure how you can continue the season. I think they'll definitely push it for as long as they can, but there's got to be a breaking point one way or the other at some point here.
Yeah, I think we all are very aware of how important sports is to the economy, because that's usually what's fueling everything. And we know, like, whoever is in charge of making decisions, administrator, staff, all of that, they're always thinking of how much money are we going to lose in a situation before anything. But on the side of being a former student athlete and on the side of being fans and, analysts or whatever, we all know what's more important is the health of these student athletes, the health of the general population. And so if that is being threatened, yes, they should definitely go into what else can we do, or how can we push this back, figure out a different time, because it's almost feeling like we're back at square one with how the cases are rising. and how it kind of seems like it's hard for them to fully control as COVID-19 continues to evolve. We get a new variant every other week, and it's making things a little difficult, even for the vaccinated. The one thing we can say is that it seems like we're seeing a definitely decrease in the amount of casualties as far as deaths go when it comes to COVID-19, but it's still one of those things where it's like, it's still a very serious issue, and we're still in the thick of a pandemic. So I am really not sure if we're going to see spring sports finish. I know they're going to push for as long as they can to keep it going, but just seeing how within this month, how many games have had to get canceled, how many players have sat out, and that's on all levels, like you said, professional and collegiate. I'm not that confident in a full season happening. I'm not.
I wouldn't say so either. So far, how this has affected ASU specifically, they haven't played since I think it's December 19th. They were supposed to play the Florida A&M Panthers, but they actually didn't play that game due to a power outage at their home court, which kind of affected like multiple areas of the ASU campus. I believe it was like some sort of blown pipe that caused the issue, but they didn't end up rescheduling that game. It ended up being canceled. Shortly after that, we had gotten news, I think like within the next day or two, that UCLA and USC had both postponed their games. So it kind of left ASU in flux where they were going to be in this 20-day window between December, what would have been like probably the 16th or 17th, whatever it was, till they would have played Arizona on January 8th in Tempe. Now, we did just get news, I think it was yesterday, that Cal is going to reschedule their game from January 19th to January 2nd. So they at least have a little bit of competitive game action in between now and then. But the whole conference as well is kind of in flux. Like, right, you've got two teams that are kind of right in the middle of their conference play. No team this season in the Pac-12 has played more than two conference games yet. And I don't know when the last one was played, but it's probably been over a week or so. And there's teams even like Washington, who's the only team in the Pac-12 who hasn't played one conference game yet. So unfortunately, but fortunately, these conference games do matter, right? If they can play them, they're going to play them. They can't afford to miss those games versus like a Florida A&M team that they don't need to. So while it kind of sucked for ASU because that was not a very good Florida team. They probably could have taken advantage of for like one of the only games of the season. ASU does get a little bit of a break, so to speak. We've been waiting very patiently on Marcus Bagley to come back, and ideally we have him as we start to head into some of the conference games coming up. But you've had all this time off. Rich and I were debating, I think, on last week's podcast, is that going to be a good thing for this team? It may or may not be. I think that's going to be a cultural thing, whether that is individual players taking that rest for taking that for advantage, or whether that's Bobby Hurley and the rest of the coaching staff, kind of how they take that in stride. But at the same time, all these other schools are getting time off. U of A is getting time off. USC, UCLA. I'm sure some of these teams, like I think both Arizona schools are practicing to some capacity. I'm not sure about either of the California schools just yet that are suspending their games. But ASU's at least in the building. They're getting some time on the court. Now they get a game before they get to go play Arizona, which I think will be good for them. But whether it's going to be positive or negative, I don't think it's going to derail the season or shoot ASU to the top of the Pac-12 standings by any means. Ultimately, they have this time off. What are they going to do with it?
That is the question, because anybody that has ever played a sport on any level knows a lot of time off can be detrimental to whatever you've had going, and it can make a huge difference. I know in track, it makes a ridiculous amount of difference. Take any time off and you're almost like back to square one. So we shall see what happens with the season. Good thing is that ASU did have a rescheduled game with Cal, and they'll be playing January 2nd. I have to ask you, Conner, do you have any sports New Year's resolutions?
So Rich and I are going to touch on that a little bit more. Are we talking like ASU specifically, other teams?
Or just for you in general, just you as a sports fan in general, any sports resolutions you have?
I would love for my Cardinals to be able to kind of flip the script from what they've been doing the last month and be able to make a push to the playoffs. But I'm a very, like, anyone who has heard me speak on this podcast or Locked On Sun Devils, like, I'm a very just glass half empty kind of fan. I take things at face value, right? Like, things are what they are. For the current state of ASU sports, could they be better? Yeah, they totally could be better. So we can't pass off any of the reasons why they could be losing games. An example for the Vegas Bowl tonight. I keep telling people, like, are you worried all these players being out for ASU is going to hurt them? Yeah, but they were probably going to lose before. I'm just calling a spade a spade. So as far as resolutions go, definitely check out the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. We'll be getting a little bit more into that later on come the first of the year, I believe, or I think Monday, January 3rd, I think is the first day we'll be recording for that. Okay. So we'll definitely talk about that in a little bit more. But for anyone listening to this right now, I think a good resolution for us all is if games are canceled due to COVID, like things are more important than sports. They're definitely impactful to our lives. Anyone that's a big sports fan totally gets that. But end of the day, if it's canceled, it's canceled. Nothing you can do about it.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Per usual, we always love having you on. You guys can check out Locked On Sun Devils on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. You can also check them out on Twitter at LO_Sun Devils, and then Conner at CDreos, that's CDREOS. And then you can follow Locked On Pac-12 podcast on Twitter at LO_Pac-12. Thank you so much for making Locked On Pac-12 podcast your first listen every day. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Sun Bowl that has been long awaited, and a little more about the Rose Bowl that we have to look forward to over the weekend. So now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, so make sure you guys check it out. Other than that, stay locked on Pac-12 on the Locked On Network.